The biggest threat to your change program, it might not be budget cuts, it might not be resistant employees, it might not be impossible timelines, it might be something else entirely. It could just be 3 voices in your head, 3 voices you don't even notice. MIT's Otto Scharmer, founder of Theory U, has identified exactly what might be hijacking your very best intentions as a change leader. These aren't abstract concepts, these are tangible things that are getting in the way of the meetings you run, the strategies you plan, and the people that you lead. But I've got good news. Once you know what these voices are, you start to hear their insidious whispers. So let's go find and meet your 3 internal saboteurs. I'm Michael Bungay-Stanier. This is Change Signal. It's the podcast where we cut through the blather, the BS and the noise to find the good stuff that works in change, transformation, and growth. When you walk around the outside of the Art Gallery of New South Wales in Sydney, you see names of the good and the great in bronze up kind of just beneath the roof. Some of those names I know. There's Rubens, there's Titian, there's Da Vinci. Some I don't. I'm not sure Bartolome Esteban Murillo should really be up there with all those other greats. However, I move away from art, and if I'm imagining my own monument to the people who first influenced me about how I think about change, well, I've got my own names that I put up there. There'd be Margaret Wheatley, my first introduction to complexity and emergence, Edgar Schein, author of Humble Inquiry, championing humanity and curiosity in such a deep, profound way, Peter Block, Peter Senge, and for me also, by way of Peter Senge, Otto Scharmer. Now, Otto, the guest today, is the author and key thinker behind a really seminal change framework, Theory U. And for me, Theory U planted 2 core seeds. One about leaving the past behind to emerge into a future state. And secondly, realizing that often external change has to be preceded by internal transformation. Look, I know that sounds a bit woo-woo, so we're going to dig into it and figure out exactly what it all means. Otto, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me on.
So let's start with you sketching out the Theory U. I know you've done this 1,000 times, so forgive me for walking over old ground for you. At the heart of Theory U is this sense of deepening towards presence and presencing. But can you talk us through just an outline of it so we can then choose where to go?
It's essentially leading by letting go and letting come. You go through a process of sense-making, of deepening, and at the core of it is this process of letting go and letting come. And we all know how difficult that is because we are going through it right now. If you merge 2 different organizations, right? Why is it that years later, we often still, when you talk to people, there's us versus them? And that's kind of the deeper level of identity. And that's unless we really open up and let go of the old in order to allow kind of something, a new possibility, kind of that is perhaps kind of even more essential to who we really are, emerge. This shift in identity, this shift in the boundary between us and them, if you want, is not going to shift. So that's the, I would say, the 1-point introduction, right? Kind of leading by letting go and letting come.
I love that.
And in Theory U, where I'm trying to get the attention to is deep change. And so why is deep change the road less traveled, the road of letting go and letting come? And the answer, I would say, has to do with 3, you could say, enemies, or kind of 3 obstacles, right? Barriers that get into the way of us going through this deeper opening process. The voice of judgment, the voice of cynicism, and the voice of fear.
I'm going to jump in early, not just because this is already tantalizing, deep change, and those 3 voices that Otto mentioned, but also to say Otto is eloquent and loquacious. So I'm going to be jumping in a little more than usual just to keep encapsulating what's being said, kind of just like I did for the episode with Dr. Jason Fox.
we all know, I mean, anyone who is a leader, anyone who is a change maker, who is a facilitator or a creative person, we know these forces kind of, and 50% of dealing with them has to do with recognize them, right?
Yeah.
Voice of judgment is really why in any kind of brainstorming you can say anything, but you can't criticize another person's ideas, right?
Right.
Because if we do, we are shutting the creative power of the open mind, right? We are disabling ourselves from that source of creativity. And I would say something similar happens with the voice of cynicism, or in some degrees, it's kind of the voice of othering, right? Kind of if you have this hard boundaries between us and them, it is disengaging yourself from on your feeling level. It disables you to really tune into another stakeholder's, another person's perspective, right? And that's kind of the cynicism or the othering. And the voice of fear, of course, we all know, kind of that's eventually kind of what keeps us in the old tracks that prevents us to really try out something new. I would say navigating these three forces is one of the key leverage points when you lead an organization through this opening process. So
may I dig into this? Because this is important.
Sure.
So, I mean, I want to pick all three of them at once, but I'm particularly interested in cynicism, because that cynicism is there's nothing you can do or say that can convince me. I've already decided and I've already written you off. That's how I think of cynicism anyway. Very different from skepticism. Skepticism, I think, is like, my heart's been broken 1,000 times, but I'm really hopeful that perhaps that there's some truth in this. The cynics, they're like, no, I'm done here. Teach me how I overcome my own cynicism to a change I can feel looming.
Well, I mean, the way I use the word cynicism is essentially to signify a disconnect. I'm checked out. I'm emotionally checked out from something, right? That's what cynicism is. So when I talk about it, I really talk about it in the mode of othering, right? It's not, it's kind of pointing at something outside of yourself. So how do you deal with that? You need to go to the source. So cynicism, just as people say kind of trauma is so when you have a freeze reaction, right? It's an intelligent response from your system.
Right.
That tries to protect you from something, right? So you need to understand the source of cynicism. And so usually it is a protective move.
Yes.
That protects something within us that is precious.
Okay, this is helpful, right? Cynicism is an act of self-preservation and of protection. And what I'm sitting with here is not so much who are the cynics out there, because there's always cynics out there, but actually more powerfully for me, where might I be cynical? Where have I put up walls to protect myself in this change process? Okay, back to Otto.
And through a condition that perhaps existed in that organization, has been violated too often and therefore is at risk. What's the one-word summary for all of that? It's listening.
Right.
You need to listen.
Curiosity.
More than curiosity, actually. So it's kind of empathy, right? Kind of you need to really connect with that, with the place from where this response is originating from, by leaning into that, by curiosity and by empathy. And so when that is being articulated, that's when you have the possibility, by just acknowledging it, to create a connection that allows you to move into a different place, perhaps a deeper place.
Like, I'm nodding along to this. I mean, this is very much kind of what I stand up on soapboxes and talk about all the time. This quest to stay curious and empathetic longer and rush to action and solutions and advice giving a little less quickly. But if you're in the moment, the pressure and the anxiety and the heartfelt desire to help people by giving them the answers and finding solutions and trying to fix things is really powerful. Have you found a way to help people manage the anxiety and ambiguity of sitting in curiosity and empathy rather than solution mode?
Well, yeah. I mean, so one is I'm teaching a class here at MIT called ULab. And the first practice during the first week, I use a practice from my teacher here at MIT, Ed Schein.
I love Ed Schein.
We all do, right? Whoever is in the field of change management, right? We all do because we owe him so much. So
we do.
And that was, actually how I arrived here at MIT. So I started co-teaching his class.
Oh, fantastic.
On planned change. And one of the practices I picked up there that, until today, I have my students do and engage in is what he called empathy walk. It's essentially team up with one other student, right? Identify a target person, so a third person, that is outside of this class and that is maximum opposite to the two of you.
Right.
So it's definitely not Harvard, MIT, right?
Right.
It's kind of something, it could be politically, it could be socially, it could be in whichever way, right? Totally opposite the world you are living in. And then find that person, connect with that, and spend a couple of hours as a guest in that person's life. So that's a brutal exercise because, it forces you into your own vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
Into forming new connections and to access your not knowing and all these things. So it is a profound learning experience, and it sounds so simple. And yet it is in an age where we are boxed inside our own bubbles.
Yes.
Ever more, right? By all the mechanisms that we all know about. That's a profound exercise. So that's a practical way.
All right, a little heads up. If this is setting off light bulbs for you, keep an ear out for an upcoming interview with Adam Kahan, where we go deeper into this very practice.
On a framework way, I would say this, and that's something I elaborate in, by the way, if you allow that plug, in my new book, Presencing is the title. So one of the things I'm elaborating there, like it's a slightly evolved version, is in all things of management and change management, there's like 3 things overrated and 3 things underrated. What's the first thing overrated? Knowledge.
Yeah.
What's underrated? Not knowing, right? What's a problem with knowledge? That most of the most important things we don't know. For example, the future, right?
Yes.
What's the future going to be? And therefore, what's underrated is our capacity to sense into something that we don't know, right? To listen deeply.
Yeah.
And that's why what you said earlier, kind of accessing curiosity, is such an important aspect. The second thing, overrated, is comfort, that we need to feel comfortable. And underrated is accessing your discomfort.
Right.
And everyone in management and management development knows that as long as you stay inside your comfort zone, you're not learning anything new that is relevant for behavioral change.
Exactly.
So for that, you need to lean into your discomfort for the really relevant new information that we need to pick up. And the third thing, overrated, that may be perhaps the most puzzling is, and difficult to accept, is action. So what could be possibly wrong with action? Because isn't that why we are all here?
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the day. And I think what's wrong with action is this. If you move from a perceived challenge to an immediate response right away, what is it you're going to do? You're going to react, right? And reactive responses is the number one problem today.
So I hope you've noted these 3 provocative invitations: moving from knowing to unknowing, moving from comfort to discomfort, and moving from reaction to, well, let's call it deliberate action.
And if there's anything we all can agree on, it's probably this: more of the same is not going to cut it, right? And I'm allowing the new response that may be possible and necessary here to emerge from the situation. rather than, projecting my old patterns, behavioral patterns kind of onto the situation.
Right.
So humility, equanimity, and stillness as three major gateways into this deeper territory of leadership that right now is more necessary than before, but at times, right, also more difficult because the noise factor and the anxiety and the reactive patterns around us have been going up. So to hold the spaces for that is, on average, more difficult today, but it's also more impactful.
Right.
The moment you do it, a lot can happen much faster now than actually in earlier years, in my experience. And the reason is because so many of us, I mean, just about everyone knows that we live in a moment of profound change where 2 out of 3 people worldwide say they want to be part of a different story of the future. They are willing to sacrifice part of their personal income to address climate change. And yet, also 2 of 3 people say, I have no agency, right? And that's the number one leadership challenge today. We need to address that gap. There is no lack of positive personal intention. There is a lack of translating that positive personal intention into collective agency.
When you talk about stillness and equanimity and not knowing, those 3 states can feel like not having agency rather than having agency. Like, I don't know what's going on. I can't do anything. I'm frozen. How do I navigate the tension there?
Yeah. No, that's a very good question. I would say the answer has to do with that in the old world of change making, we have had only a superficial understanding of what change and what action really is.
Right.
And it's basically what's visible to the eye. Right? So when you look at the phenomenon of change, I would say kind of there's probably like 3 levels, right? One is the tangible stuff that you can see, kind of no question. That's kind of where we know whether action is there or not. The second level, I would say, is like processes.
Right.
Well, if I take a picture of a situation, I don't see the process. Processes only reveal to my eye when I see a series of pictures, right? The before and after. And so it's already slightly less tangible, but it's there, right? So we can clearly identify through our observation over time whether there is something there or not. And the whole point about theory U and presencing is the claim, and it's something I didn't come up with, Michael, right? So it's something that I heard many practitioners that I talked to sharing with me time and again that there is a deeper dimension of change. And that essentially in all change and transformation, what's most important is least visible to the eye. It's the inner place from that we operate. And I remember interviewing the late CEO of Hanover Insurance, Bill O'Brien, in his reflection when he shared all his successes and failures on transformational change as a CEO with me. So he summed up his experience in the following line. He said, the success of an intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener.
Right.
He talked about something way deeper. And that is kind of this deeper place is what I today refer to with the 3 capacities of open mind, open heart, open will, or as you might say, kind of a capacity of accessing curiosity, compassion, and courage.
I want to say something here because, look, I'm not sure about you, but when I hear this from Otto, I'm both delighted and I think nervous, because working on the obvious, tangible stuff feels easier and safer and measurable and explainable and all of that. But if my job is to help people going through change access new reservoirs of curiosity and compassion and courage, Well, my job is now much harder and much messier and more complex and less controllable than it's ever been. But isn't it also more important and more human and perhaps even more noble than it's ever been? I think so. Okay, off my soapbox, back to Otto.
Now, to come back to yours, where's the agency there?
Yeah.
Right? And I would say when transformative change or real co-creativity happens, it tends to happen from that deeper place of an open state, an open mind, an open heart, an open will.
Right.
However, if we empirically just look around and be honest with ourselves, we see a lot of the opposite.
For sure.
A freeze reaction of the mind, heart, and will,
Yep.
aka amplification of ignorance, hate, anger, and fear. And that's kind of how you win an election. And that's kind of how you, when you want to maximize user engagement as a social media company,
Yeah.
how you build a business model that generates $1 trillion company, right? So I'm not saying that the closed or the frozen mind, heart, and will is not successful. What I'm saying is, yes, it's basically damaging and disintegrating kind of our community. So it has like profound cost in terms of, the foundations of democracy and the terms of human and social well-being. So we have a choice.
Yes.
We can respond to it from an inner place that is shaped by the open mind, open
Right.
heart, or open will.
Equanimity, stillness. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or we can respond to it by a freeze reaction of the mind, heart, will. And that is our choice. And that, of course, is then manifesting in the quality of results. So that is exactly what I would define as a social field. It's kind of like a 3-layered model. Kind of the social field is basically shaped by the quality of interactions, the quality of relationships that we have that are shaped by the inner and outer conditions, right? So that's basically where I would say agency applies to all 3 levels, to the results, to our patterns of relationships, but definitely also to the inner place that we are operating from as change makers and leaders.
What do people get wrong about Theory U and presencing? What makes you kind of slap your head and go, here we go again?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, Michael. And I would say, I mean, there may be several things, but here's the first thing that came to my mind when you said it. It is that Theory U and all these principles, open mind, open heart, open will, and so forth, it's about embodying this stuff, not preaching it. It's not kind of how do you bring Theory U into the world? That's what I'm often asked. And I then say, well, I don't need to bring it anywhere because it's already there, right?
Right. Be the change you want to see in the world.
It's embodied in our best practices that are already existing. So in a way, embodying, these principles really allows you to access kind of these deeper levels of dormant human creativity and connection that are always there, but that if they're unattended to, are not being activated.
Yeah.
Theory U is basically, I mean, what I realized when I came here to MIT is that when you look at all the existing learning methodologies, it's really learning based on reflecting the experiences that we got. That's really the summary of pretty much all of it. And yet, what's needed today is something very different, which is learning from emerging future possibilities, right? By leaning into, by sensing and actualizing the future that stays in need of us in order to manifest, in order to be realized. And that's something I think that requires an embodiment of these principles and not just talking about it.
Otto, for people who are interested in Theory U or interested in your new book or your work in general, where do they find you?
Well, you could just go to my homepage, ottoscharmer.com, There's also the Presencing Institute, presencing.org, kind of is a second website. And then the new book, Presencing, 7 Practices for Transforming Self, Society, and Business. If you go to my homepage, you will also find a link.
Otto, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much.
I'm curious what struck the deepest chord for you in all of this. I mean, you can probably guess mine because I got all excited about it midway through the episode. This idea that our deep work as change leaders is about cultivating the capacity for curiosity and compassion, humility and courage in those around us. I mean, to significantly bastardize that quote from Winston Churchill, we shape our people and thereafter they shape the world. It's important work. There are more resources to support you to do it at thechangesignal.com, and I'm glad you're here.